Before we begin this epic tale, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. We love hearing from our Viking warriors around the world. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Now, let's dive into our story. The bitter wind of early winter howled across the jagged cliffs of Nordmark, carrying with it the salt spray of the churning North Sea and the promise of harsher days ahead. Ragnar Ironbeard pulled his thick woolen cloak tighter around his massive shoulders as he navigated the treacherous mountain path, his leather boots finding purchase on the ice-slicked stones with the practiced ease of a man who had spent 40 winters in these unforgiving lands. The expedition had been a disaster from the start. What should have been a simple raid on the Saxon settlements across the water had turned into a nightmare when an unexpected storm drove their longship far off course. They had crashed against these very cliffs 3 days ago, and of his crew of 23 warriors, only 7 had survived the wreck. Now, with their supplies dwindling and no clear path back to their village, Ragnar found himself scouring these desolate heights for anything that might aid their survival. The morning mist clung to the mountainside like the breath of sleeping giants, making visibility poor as Ragnar carefully picked his way along a narrow ledge that seemed to lead toward a series of caves he had spotted from below. His weathered hands, scarred from countless battles and marked by the intricate tattoos that told the story of his victories, gripped his walking staff with white knuckles as loose stones skittered away beneath his feet, disappearing into the fog-shrouded depths below. It was then that he heard it, a sound so faint and strange that at first he thought it might be the wind playing tricks on his ears. A soft, rhythmic whimpering, almost like the mewling of a newborn calf, but with an otherworldly quality that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Ragnar paused, his pale blue eyes scanning the rocky outcropping ahead, searching for the source of the mysterious sound. The cry came again, weaker this time, and Ragnar's warrior instincts kicked in. Something was in distress, and in these harsh lands, even the smallest advantage could mean the difference between life and death for his men. He pressed forward more urgently now, his heavy frame moving with surprising agility as he climbed toward what appeared to be a shallow cave mouth carved into the mountainside. As he drew closer, the temperature seemed to rise noticeably, and Ragnar noticed something that made him stop dead in his tracks. The rocks around the cave entrance were blackened and smooth, as if they had been subjected to intense heat. Stranger still, there was no snow or ice on the ground here, despite the frigid conditions that prevailed everywhere else on the mountain. The very air shimmered with residual warmth, and Ragnar caught the acrid scent of sulfur mixed with something else, something ancient and primal that spoke to the deepest, most primitive parts of his Viking soul. Gripping his iron-headed spear more tightly, Ragnar approached the cave entrance with the cautious steps of a seasoned warrior. The whimpering sound was definitely coming from within, growing weaker by the moment, and now he could see a faint, pulsing glow emanating from the depths of the cavern. Every instinct told him to turn back, to flee from whatever unnatural force had created this place, but Ragnar Ironbeard had not earned his reputation by backing down from the unknown. As his eyes adjusted to the dim interior, Ragnar gasped at what he saw. The cave was larger than it had appeared from outside, its walls smooth and vitrified as if shaped by incredible heat. Strange, crystalline formations jutted from the ceiling, and the floor was covered in what looked like the remnants of a massive nest made from branches, precious metals, and glittering gems. But it was what lay in the center of this nest that made Ragnar's blood run cold, and his heart race with equal measures of terror and wonder. Curled among the scattered treasure was a creature no larger than a hunting hound, but unmistakably draconic in nature. Its scales, which should have gleamed like polished emeralds, were dull and lifeless, and its serpentine neck was stretched out in a posture of exhaustion or pain. Great tears had formed in the delicate membrane of its wings, and a massive gash along its side leaked golden ichor that steamed when it hit the cave floor. The creature's breathing was labored and irregular, each exhale accompanied by tiny wisps of smoke that dissipated quickly in the cold air. For a long moment, Ragnar simply stood there, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Dragons were the stuff of legend, the monsters that featured in the epic songs sung by skalds around the fire during the long winter nights. They were not supposed to be real, fragile things that could be wounded and left dying in mountain caves. Yet here was proof that the old stories held more truth than anyone had dared believe. The young dragon's eyes, large, intelligent, and the color of molten gold, flickered open and fixed on Ragnar with an intensity that made the Viking warrior take an involuntary step backward. But instead of the rage or hostility he might have expected from such a creature, Ragnar saw something that struck him to his very core, desperate hope mixed with profound sadness, as if the dragon understood that this might be its last chance for salvation. The creature tried to lift its head, but the effort seemed to drain what little strength it had left, and it collapsed back into the nest with a pitiful whine that tugged at something deep in Ragnar's chest. The sound reminded him, impossibly, of his own son's cries when the boy had been injured in a training accident years ago. The same vulnerability, the same trust that help would come. Moving slowly so as not to startle the wounded dragon, Ragnar approached the nest and knelt beside the magnificent creature. Up close, he could see that it was barely more than a hatchling, its body still bearing the soft downy scales of youth beneath the harder adult scales that were just beginning to emerge. The wound on its side was deep but clean, as if made by a blade rather than claws or teeth, and Ragnar's experienced eye told him that while serious, it was not necessarily fatal if properly treated. "Easy, little one," Ragnar murmured in the gentle tone he had once used to soothe his own children, his massive hands hovering uncertainly over the dragon's trembling form. "I'm not here to hurt you." The dragon's golden eyes tracked his movements with startling intelligence, and Ragnar had the unsettling feeling that the creature understood every word he spoke. When he reached out to examine the wound more closely, the dragon flinched but did not try to pull away, as if it sensed that this strange, bearded giant might be its only hope for survival. Ragnar quickly assessed the situation with the practical mind of a man who had seen his share of battlefield injuries. The dragon was suffering from blood loss, exhaustion, and exposure to the cold, conditions he knew how to treat, regardless of what kind of creature he was dealing with. More importantly, he recognized something in those golden eyes that called to his deepest instincts as a protector and leader. This was not a monster, but a lost child in desperate need of help. Without hesitation, Ragnar began removing his outer cloak, the thick woolen garment that had protected him from the mountain cold. He wrapped it carefully around the dragon's shivering form, noting how the creature seemed to relax slightly at the warmth and comfort the makeshift blanket provided. From his pack, he retrieved a leather water skin and a small pouch of dried meat, precious supplies that his men needed for their own survival, but which he offered without a second thought to this unexpected patient. The dragon lapped weakly at the water, its forked tongue darting out to catch every precious drop, and Ragnar felt a surge of satisfaction when he saw some color return to those magnificent golden eyes. The dried meat was more challenging, as the creature's jaw seemed too weak to chew properly, but Ragnar solved this by chewing small pieces himself and then offering the softened morsels to the dragon, who accepted them with what could only be described as gratitude. As he worked to stabilize his unusual patient, Ragnar found himself talking to the dragon in low, soothing tones, the way he might comfort a wounded warrior or a frightened child. He told the creature about his village, about the storm that had brought him to this place, about his hopes of finding a way home. The dragon listened with obvious attention, occasionally responding with soft chirps or gentle nudges that seemed to indicate understanding and appreciation for the company. Hours passed as Ragnar tended to the dragon's wounds, using techniques learned from the village healer and his own battlefield experience. He cleaned the gash with melted snow and bandaged it with strips torn from his own shirt, ignoring the way the cold bit at his newly exposed skin. He fed the creature small amounts of food and water at regular intervals, monitored its breathing, and did everything in his power to make it comfortable in its mountain sanctuary. As the day wore on and the dragon's condition began to stabilize, Ragnar found himself facing a dilemma that would have been unthinkable when he first entered the cave. His men were waiting for him below, counting on his leadership to get them home safely. They had limited supplies and no guarantee that rescue would come. Taking care of a wounded dragon, even a small one, would stretch their resources to the breaking point and might doom them all. But as he looked into those trusting golden eyes, Ragnar knew he could not abandon this creature to die alone in the cold. The dragon had somehow found its way into his heart, awakening protective instincts that he thought had died with his own children years ago. More than that, some deep Viking intuition told him that this meeting was no accident, that the Norns had woven this moment into the tapestry of fate for reasons that would only become clear with time. As darkness began to fall outside the cave, Ragnar made his decision. He would take the dragon with him, consequences be damned. His men were loyal and would follow his lead, even if they didn't understand his reasoning. And if the creature truly was what he believed it to be, then perhaps the gods had sent them not just a burden, but a blessing beyond imagining. The dragon seemed to sense his resolve, and for the first time since Ragnar had found it, the creature made an effort to stand. Its legs trembled with weakness, and it nearly collapsed back into the nest, but its golden eyes burned with a determination that matched Ragnar's own. Slowly, carefully, the Viking warrior helped the young dragon to its feet and began the careful process of preparing for the journey down the mountain. As they prepared to leave the cave together, Ragnar caught sight of something glinting among the scattered treasure of the nest. A scale larger and more brilliant than any he had seen on the dragon's body, that seemed to pulse with its own inner fire. Without thinking, he picked it up and slipped it into his pouch, whether as a good luck charm, a reminder of this extraordinary day, or something more, he could not say. All he knew was that his life had just taken a turn toward a destiny he could never have imagined when he first set foot on this cursed mountain. The first chapter of their unlikely partnership had begun, and neither the Viking warrior nor the dragon hatchling could have foreseen the legends that would grow from this simple act of compassion in a cold mountain cave. The descent from the dragon's mountain refuge proved to be one of the most challenging journeys of Ragnar's long and eventful life. The young dragon, whom he had begun calling Emberclaw in his mind, was weak from its injuries and could only walk for short distances before needing to rest. Ragnar found himself carrying the creature for much of the treacherous path, down to where his men had made their temporary camp. The dragon's surprising weight, much heavier than its size suggested, testing even his legendary strength. The reactions of his surviving crew members when Ragnar emerged from the morning mist, carrying what was unmistakably a dragon, ranged from shocked silence to outright terror. Olaf the Red, his second-in-command and oldest friend, actually drew his sword before recognizing the gentle way Ragnar cradled the creature and the obvious care in his actions. "By Thor's hammer, Ragnar," Olaf breathed, his weathered face pale beneath his copper beard. "What sorcery is this? Have the mountain spirits addled your wits?" Ragnar set Emberclaw down carefully on a bed of pine boughs that his men had gathered, noting how the dragon immediately curled into a defensive position, while keeping its golden eyes fixed on the circle of warriors. The creature was clearly frightened, but trying not to show it, a display of courage that reminded Ragnar powerfully of his own son's first battle. "No sorcery, old friend," Ragnar replied calmly, though he could hear the murmur of unease running through his men. "I found this one dying in a cave up there, wounded, alone, barely more than a hatchling. Would you have me leave a defenseless creature to die when I had the power to help?" Eric the Skald, the youngest member of their group and their keeper of stories and songs, stepped forward with wide eyes full of wonder rather than fear. "Is it truly a dragon, Jarl? like the ones in the old tales? Before Ragnar could answer, Emberclaw lifted its head and fixed Eric with those intelligent golden eyes, then made a sound that was somewhere between a purr and a chirp, clearly an attempt at friendly communication. The young skald laughed with delight and knelt down, extending his hand slowly toward the dragon. "Careful, lad," warned Thorvald Blacksmith, but his tone was more curious than alarmed. As their group's craftsman and practical thinker, he was studying the dragon with professional interest, though I'll grant you, it doesn't seem particularly fearsome at the moment. Emberclaw sniffed Eric's outstretched hand delicately, then allowed the young man to stroke the smooth scales along its neck. The dragon's eyes half closed in apparent pleasure, and it made that strange purring sound again, much to the amazement of the watching Vikings. "It's like a great cat," Eric marveled, his fear completely forgotten in the face of this magical encounter. "See how it responds to gentle touch? And look at the intelligence in those eyes. It's like it understands every word we're saying." Ragnar nodded, pleased that at least one of his men was open to accepting their unusual new companion. "That's exactly what I thought. Whatever the songs say about dragons being mindless beasts, this one is clearly far more intelligent than any animal I've ever encountered." Over the following days, as they worked to repair their damaged longship using salvaged materials and tools rescued from the wreck, the relationship between the Vikings and their dragon guest continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Emberclaw proved to be not just intelligent, but remarkably helpful, using its superior eyesight to spot useful debris washed up on the beach and its surprising strength to help move heavy timbers into position. The dragon's wounds healed with remarkable speed, the gash on its side closing cleanly and leaving barely a scar within a week. As its strength returned, Emberclaw began displaying abilities that left the Vikings in awe. It could generate enough heat from its breath to start fires even in the dampest conditions, making their camp life immeasurably more comfortable. Its keen senses could detect changes in weather long before any human would notice, giving them advance warning of incoming storms. But perhaps most importantly, the dragon seemed to genuinely enjoy their company, especially that of Ragnar. It would curl up beside the Viking leader during the cold nights, its naturally warm body providing blessed relief from the mountain chill. During the day, it followed Ragnar like a devoted hound, learning to respond to simple commands and even seeming to understand complex instructions about their ship repair efforts. "It's forming a bond with you," Eric observed one evening as they sat around their fire. Emberclaw dozed contentedly with its head resting on Ragnar's knee. "Like the wolves that sometimes attach themselves to human families, but deeper somehow, more purposeful." Ragnar stroked the dragon's smooth scales absently, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "I've been thinking the same thing. There's something almost mystical about how we found each other, as if the fates themselves arranged our meeting." Olaf, who had gradually warmed to the dragon over the past week, nodded thoughtfully. "The creature saved our lives yesterday when it warned us about that rock slide, and the way it helped us catch those fish in the tidal pools. It's like having a partner who understands exactly what we need without being told." Indeed, Emberclaw had proven invaluable to their survival efforts. Its ability to sense danger had already prevented several accidents, and its unique skills had solved problems that would have been insurmountable for the Vikings alone. When they needed to reach salvageable materials trapped in underwater wreckage, the dragon could hold its breath far longer than any human and retrieve items from depths that would have been impossible for them to access. As their longship slowly took shape under their combined efforts, Ragnar found himself wondering what would happen when they finally returned to their village. How would his people react to the presence of a dragon? Would they see Emberclaw as he did, as a loyal companion and valuable ally? Or would ancient fears and superstitions turn them against the creature that had become so important to him? These concerns came to a head on the morning they launched their repaired vessel and began the journey home. Emberclaw had grown significantly during their time together, now standing as tall as a large dog and beginning to show the graceful proportions of its adult form. When it became clear that the dragon intended to accompany them on their sea voyage, Ragnar faced the moment of truth with his crew. "Men," he said, gathering them on the beach before they departed, "we've all seen what this creature can do. It's saved our lives, helped with our work, and proven itself to be loyal and intelligent beyond question. But I know that bringing a dragon back to our village will raise questions and fears among our people. If any of you wish to stay behind rather than face those challenges, I'll understand." To a man, his crew stepped forward and placed their hands on the ship's hull in the traditional gesture of commitment to a voyage. Even those who had been most skeptical about the dragon initially now recognized the value of their unusual companion. "We sail together or not at all," Olaf declared, speaking for all of them. "The beast has earned its place among us through courage and loyalty. Let anyone who questions that try to face the open sea without its help." The voyage home proved to be unlike any other in Ragnar's long experience as a sea captain. Emberclaw seemed to have an intuitive understanding of sailing, positioning itself where its weight would help balance the ship and using its keen eyesight to spot hazards or navigation landmarks long before they became visible to human eyes. During a fierce storm that struck on their second day at sea, the dragon's ability to generate heat kept them all from freezing, while its weather sense helped them navigate safely through the worst of the tempest. But it was during an encounter with raiders on their third day that Emberclaw truly proved its worth as more than just a helpful companion. 3 ships flying unfamiliar banners appeared on the horizon, clearly intent on intercepting their damaged vessel. Outnumbered and outgunned, Ragnar and his men prepared for what looked like a hopeless fight. That was when Emberclaw rose to its full height at the prow of their ship and unleashed a roar that carried clearly across the water to the approaching raiders. The sound was unlike anything the Vikings had heard before, deep, resonant, and filled with a primal power that seemed to shake the very air. More impressive still, the dragon followed its roar with a spectacular display of flame, sending a column of fire high into the sky that could be seen for miles. The effect on the raiders was immediate and dramatic. Their ships came to a complete stop, their crews clearly visible as tiny figures pointing and gesturing in apparent panic. After several minutes of heated discussion that could be seen if not heard across the water, the raider ships turned away and disappeared back toward the horizon, obviously deciding that whatever treasure they might have gained was not worth facing a dragon-protected vessel. "By the gods," Eric breathed, staring at Emberclaw with new respect. "Did you see how they fled? They turned tail and ran like whipped dogs the moment they realized what we carried." Ragnar felt a surge of pride that surprised him with its intensity. He had always taken satisfaction in the achievements of his warriors and his children, but this felt different, deeper, and more personal. Emberclaw had not just defended their ship, it had chosen to stand with them, to use its growing power in service of their survival and safety. As they approached the familiar coastline of their homeland, Ragnar knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Emberclaw would face them together. The bond forged between them during those desperate days on the mountain had proven itself strong enough to weather storms, both literal and metaphorical. More than that, he was beginning to understand that their partnership might be the foundation for something unprecedented in the history of his people. A new chapter in the age-old relationship between humans and the legendary creatures of the sky. The young dragon that now stood proudly at his side, scales gleaming like emeralds in the sunlight, and eyes bright with intelligence and loyalty, bore little resemblance to the dying creature he had found in that mountain cave. But the transformation had been mutual. Ragnar, too, felt changed by their encounter, awakened to possibilities he had never imagined, and committed to a destiny that would reshape not just his own life, but the legends that would be told for generations to come. As their longship entered the familiar waters of their home fjord, both Viking and dragon looked toward the future with anticipation, ready to face whatever trials awaited them in the next chapter of their extraordinary partnership. Years have passed since that fateful day on the mountain when Ragnar Ironbeard found a dying dragon hatchling and chose compassion over caution. Emberclaw, now grown to magnificent adulthood with wings that span the width of 3 longships, rules the northern skies as the undisputed king of dragons. Yet despite his awesome power and the fear he inspires in enemies across distant lands, he remains utterly devoted to the aging Viking who saved his life. Their village, once struggling to survive the harsh northern winters, has become the most prosperous settlement in all the Nordic lands. Ships arrive daily seeking audience with the legendary Dragon Jarl and his magnificent companion, bringing tribute and trade from across the known world. Children grow up hearing tales of the bond between man and dragon, learning that true strength comes not from conquest, but from the courage to show mercy to those in need. Ragnar, now known throughout the lands as the Dragon Friend, sits each evening by his fire, with Emberclaw's great head resting beside his chair, both of them content in the knowledge that their partnership has changed the world forever. The old Viking's hair may be white as winter snow, and his hands marked by the passage of years, but his eyes still hold the same determined gleam they possessed on that cold mountain morning when he chose to save a dying creature rather than pass by. Sometimes, on clear nights when the aurora dances across the sky, the two companions take to the air together, soaring high above the fjords and mountains they both call home. In those moments, suspended between earth and stars, with the wind rushing past them, both remember the desperate beginning of their friendship and marvel at the legend it has become. The Skald Eric, now grown old himself, still tells their story around winter fires and always ends with the same words. Thus we learn that the greatest treasures are not gold or silver, but the bonds we forge through kindness and the loyalty that grows when we choose to help rather than to harm. And in the great hall where Ragnar and Emberclaw hold court, carved into the wooden beams above the high seat, runs an inscription in ancient runes that serves as their eternal motto: strength in unity, power in compassion, legend in loyalty. Udays, their story continues still. For as long as there are those brave enough to show mercy to the helpless and wise enough to recognize that sometimes the greatest heroes come in the most unexpected forms, the legacy of Ragnar and Emberclaw will endure, inspiring new tales of friendship between the earthbound and those who rule the endless sky. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. What did you think of Ragnar and Emberclaw's story? Share your thoughts below and stay tuned for more epic Viking adventures.